What's up, Santa? Whoa. I can't express how excited I am to be here. I don't know if you all know this, but CSL Santa Rosa is kind of a big deal. Yeah. And so I gotta thank Dr. Edward and everybody who I've interacted with. You all are really living up to your reputation of being absolutely wonderful to work with. It is amazing to be here. It must be something about Sonoma County or something. I don't know. My parents actually came. My mom flies for, or works for Southwest, so we all got to fly out here for free, and they were at the first service, so we got to spend a couple days in Napa Valley. And my dad saw this sign. It was like a tourist sign that says 2 to 3 glasses of wine a day. What does it say? 2 to 3 greatly reduces your risk of giving a crap. And we went on like 2 or 3 wine tastings over the weekend. I have to say, I think it's right. I know it's a tourist sign, but I found myself pretty relaxed. But yeah, this whole valley is beautiful. Like even for those who don't drink, there's something about the energy of this valley that I've really been attuning to since I've been here. So I am so absolutely grateful to be here. I also am told in the second service I have to stay close to this thing because I'm being videotaped. So this is going to be my leash. I just need to make contact with this thing so I don't go running off to the side. So our affirmation for this month, as we're starting this new month, you can say it with me, is I care for the poor. And I'm going to unpack that statement a little bit later. But this first week, as we venture into this idea of I care for the poor, is real compassion. And I actually added that word real to the beginning because as I was doing research and preparing for this talk, I recognized and found that there are a lot of different understandings of that word compassion. And I actually looked it up. The first definition I looked up described compassion as sympathetic pity. And I was like, ugh, really? If that's the case, I hope I never experience someone having compassion for me ever. Like, there's nothing that makes me feel smaller than I already am than a little bit of pity. Evan Dow Williamson that works here, I guess he was making jokes about, I hope Masando can see over the podium. So I beat him to it. I made my own short joke, and you're just getting that over with. So it's definitely not pity, right? Real compassion is definitely not pity, and I think we can all resonate with that, right? And it's also not what I think I can go to when I'm feeling uncomfortable, when someone may be sharing something difficult with me, something that we may like to do in this particular spiritual community, and this particular teaching is hearing something difficult from someone and then totally jumping to the positive right away, right? And listen, I totally resonate with the power of positivity. Like I'm a minister in the science of mind teaching. Duh. I hope so, right? But I think there's a limit sometimes. I gotta pull myself back, when someone's sharing something really hard with me. I can't imagine someone coming to me is like, "Wow, Masando, I just found out I lost my mom. My mom passed away this past weekend." And I could respond "Why are you being so negative?" I would never do that. None of us would ever do that, right? But sometimes in our mind, there's different ways that I think we can have some sort of version of that, in trying to paint a silver lining around a cloud that's made of fart juice. That joke went over way better in the first service. In my mind, it's way funnier than it actually is when I say it out loud, so I apologize. So when you look at compassion and you actually look at the etymology of the word, I love etymology because it breaks it down and gives you like how these words came to be based on the languages that they come from, and it's often like Latin or Greek, right? And compassion comes from the Latin pati, uh, which means to feel deeply, undergo, or experience, and then you match that with just the prefix co or com, which just means with, right? And so compassion, the etymology of compassion simply means to feel deeply, undergo, or experience with. Which I recognize can be a little intimidating. Like, there's some folks that I may not want to undergo or experience or feel deeply with. Like, you got your thoughts, I got mine. I don't know what's going on in there, but I don't want to have anything to do with that, right? Like, we can try to compartmentalize. But here's the thing. Like, we're wired for that kind of connection. Has anyone in here heard of like mirror neurons? Mirror neurons? Yeah. Mirror neurons is this cool, crazy phenomenon like in our brains that allows us to experience something that someone else is experiencing, like just by observing it, right? Like that's why I think I love sports so much. Like I grew up an athlete, but like I'm like 37 and just old and hurt myself all the time. I just hurt myself all the time. I can't play soccer. It hurts me now, right? So I watch sports and I'm a fanatic of sports, right? And I love baseball, I love football, and what happens when I'm watching those sports is there's something going on in me that feels like I am actually experiencing what they're experiencing. I'm experiencing all the emotions of their victory and all the emotions of their defeat, and I'm right there with them. And those mirror neurons, what's happening in my brain is like I'm actually doing it even though I'm just sitting on the couch eating potato chips. I didn't have to work for that. But that's a phenomenon, like it's happening all of the time, and we're wired for that. So Brene Brown actually talks about this. Everyone know Brene Brown? Yeah, she's like blowing up. She's like the new Oprah. And she's a sociologist that does a lot of work around, she did a lot of work around shame. She does a lot of work around connection. And she uses a different word than compassion, but I think it really captures compassion in this context, or real compassion in this context. And she uses the word empathy. So she did a talk, and then someone did some cool animation over it. So I wanted to share it with you because I think it's really beautiful and poignant. Cartoons are wise. So, man, that last statement is just so beautiful, and I want to say it again. Rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection. And so, I get that often when we respond with pity, often when we respond with trying to paint a silver lining on something, often when we respond with sympathy, it's coming from a good place. I totally recognize that. We're ultimately just wanting to make it better, like any other fixers in the house. That's my most comfortable place, Like, my wife's telling me something, I'm like, how can I make it better? I don't need to learn anymore. Just like, what can I do? She's like, listen. Like, really? That's so hard. And I think often we get scared too about, not knowing what to say. But I love the advice that she gives is often the best thing to say is to say, whew, wow, I don't even know what to say right now, but I'm so glad that you told me. And in doing that, we begin to access that place within them that might be making them feel isolated in some way. And instead of being scared of that, instead of resisting that, because it asks us to actually touch into our own pain in some way, and our own experience of pain. But then when we go there with them, they don't have to hold it on their own. And somehow healing can happen in that place. Somehow through that connection, somehow through that real compassion, healing can happen, right? And I've experienced this. I think we've probably all experienced this in some way. And I think some of the most profound places I've experienced this phenomenon is within spiritual community and within support groups, within recovery groups, within men's groups, right? I'm a part of a men's group. I've been part of the same men's group for like 7 years. And it's just basically a bunch of dudes talking about stuff they don't want to talk about, which often is their feelings. Or other stuff that I may be feeling shame around, or ways that I may be carrying something and feel like if I were to share this thing, I probably wouldn't be loved or approved or have any friends anymore, right? And yet, we come into this place without judgment, we come into this place with love, and we come into this space where we're just sharing of ourselves very deeply and very vulnerably. And there's no crosstalk, there's no fixing. It's really hard for 7 dudes sitting in a circle not to do. There's just a space where no matter what someone is bringing to that circle, it has a place to live, it has a place to be, it has a place to breathe. And all of a sudden, because I don't have to hold it on my own, I have a chance to heal. And through the connection that I feel, through the actual real compassion that I'm experiencing in that moment, something within me begins to lighten. And I can walk away from that place without receiving any advice, without receiving any sympathy, and feel more whole. I get to be whole, right? And so there's practices that like that we can take part in, because I also recognize that this is not something that we do all the time, right? And so there's some practices that help us to experience real compassion and real connection, right? And really all it is these practices are just helping us to experience the oneness that we like to talk about a lot in this church. Because it's really fun to talk about oneness, but there are opportunities for us to actually experience that thing called oneness all the time. And so there's the Buddhists have this practice that we'll actually go through in my workshop. We'll start with in my workshop. That helps us to feel this resonance, right? And it's basically just, it's a practice that helps to build and generate compassion, both for someone you really care about and also for someone you may not really care for. And to recognize that there's always a possibility of experiencing that resonance in every moment, right? And then there's also ways that where through our dialogue and through talking with each other, we can experience this resonance simply by being with someone and just being so present in your listening that you can pick up on the ways that you're connecting. And it's almost like a mindfulness practice, because in every interaction we have, no matter who it's with, even if it's just like the person at the drive-thru or whatever, there's a moment where you can connect with that person. And that moment is your experience of oneness. That moment is your experience of connection. And that moment is our ability to experience the divine, right? So when we take this real compassion understanding and we translate that onto this idea of caring for the poor, I think what it invites us into in that moment is to recognize that we have this ability to connect with folks that may be outside of our socioeconomic class, right? And sort of be confronted with maybe some ways that we have had some stigma around even the word the poor. Because I have to be honest, when I first saw I care for the poor, I had a little bit of a resistance to it. Because the poor sort of categorizes a socioeconomic class, and I think we all have this idea of what that is and who that is and how they show up in the world and blah, blah, blah. We have maybe have family members or folks that experience that, or there may be some stuff in our past that have shaped that, but most likely we have some stigmas around what even the poor is, right? And in churches, we like to do these drives of food drives and school supply drives, these charity events that are often like us, like giving something to those that are in need, which is great. Like, I'm so glad that we do charity work. But often what that does is it perpetuates this sort of power dynamic, right? Of like, I'm offering something to you. And I feel really good about myself. And it feels good. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, it feels good to give. I'm not telling any of us to stop our charity work or not to give. But it's to recognize that what we're seeking to do and what we can do is to ground that work in a spiritual understanding that actually levels out the playing field. And to know that we have just as much to learn from and to gain from and to experience the divine through the folks that we're serving as they do from us, right? If not way more, right? If not way more. Most likely, we have a lot more to gain and learn from folks that we're seeking to serve. Dr. Ernest Holmes, our founder, Dr. Ernest Holmes, talks about compassion in this way, which I think is really beautiful. He says, compassion and caring are the ties that bind us together in mutual understanding and in the unified attempt to uncover the divinity in each other. I love that it's a verb. I love how compassion is a verb here. It's to uncover, right? And that we have to spend enough time like in the practice of uncovering the divinity in every single person that we meet. And so what that requires is, as we're beginning to practice compassion out in the world, is that we don't just have these transactions of just giving and one person, one power dynamic giving to someone who may have less power, right? But it asks us to actually come into relationship. It asks us to widen our circle of belonging. It asks us to really experience this thing called God through each and every person that we meet in greater and greater circles and in more deep and more ordinary ways, right? This guy, Brian Stevenson, has this beautiful quote. Brian Stevenson was recently on Oprah, so he sold a ton of books after that. And he's a lawyer that spent a lot of time with folks on death row, right? Maybe, folks in our minds who have done some irredeemable things, right? And even have gone through the justice system such that they believe that they, from that point on, literally do not deserve life, right? And that they are not a whole person, and they're being punished for what they did. Right? And what he recognized is spending time with these folks and learning from them, it gave him, actually changed who he was and changed his understanding of humanity and allowed him to experience this quality of the divine in a way that he could have never experienced before, and to literally see the wholeness of each and every person, literally no matter what. Right? And so this is what he says. He says, when you get close to something that's meaningful for you, it changes you. We all have to find ways to get closer to the things that we care about. Right? And so, I think just to look at your program and to see everything that's happening, I'm so really inspired and awed by what this community is up to and how you're seeking to make an impact in the world. And what I really recognize is that you're not just doing that because it's the right thing to do. You're doing that because it's a integral part of your spiritual path, right? So I grew up in this teaching. Growing up, I got really good at thinking about myself a lot and only focusing on myself. I just being a master manifester of everything that I could want, right? But I was also really influenced by this Buddhist aspect of my upbringing. And the Buddhists, their understanding of compassion doesn't come from a place because it's the right thing to do. The Buddhist understanding of compassion actually comes from the understanding that we're all so interconnected, that there can't be enlightenment just for one person, right? There's this bodhisattva vow. Is anyone familiar with the bodhisattva vow? The bodhisattva vow is, folks, that they take a vow to come back lifetime after lifetime until all sentient beings are free from suffering, until all sentient beings are enlightened. That's pretty intense. Like, those guys are going to be coming back for a while at this rate. But it's a beautiful vow because it really recognizes that there is no enlightenment just for me. There is no liberation just for me. We can't be free unless we're all free. I can't be free unless we're all free. That's how deep this goes. So why am I trying just liberation for myself? The whole point of life is liberation for all. Is nirvana for all. Is enlightenment for all. Is spiritual awakening for all. Because there is no you and me. There's just us. Right? And so, when I integrated that, I'm like, I can't just be a minister that's only talking about ourselves. I have to integrate ways that we are also out in the world. Because I recognize that's not just the right thing to do. It's an integral part of my own spiritual path. It's an integral part of my growth. It's an integral part of how I continue on, that I'm limited only by thinking just about myself, right? And I think we all get that a little bit. And so as we go along this work, what's really so cool about it too is as we begin to approach, those things in the world that really move us, because here's the thing. We can't just, when you look out into the world and all of the problems, like, we can't all do it all. It was just like that song that was sang, right? Like, we can't be part of it all, but I can do my little piece, right? My hands are also kind of small. But we must be brave enough to look out into the world and find the things that we're really connecting to. It's really calling to our heart. And pair that with some aspect of ourselves that was really being called to be expressed in the world. In our workshop this afternoon, after we do those resonance practices and helping to cultivate compassion, we're gonna talk about and explore this place where we look at what are some aspects that are really seeking to be expressed, and what are some needs in the world that I'm really connecting with, right? Frederick Buechner, this is how he talks about this, and I love this quote. It says, "The place God calls you to is a place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet." You can take a picture of that if you want. And that's what really we're going to explore in this workshop, and that's what I want to ask us all to continue to do in our life, right? Because this isn't just about, being a part of the transformation that's seeking to happen on this planet. This isn't just about that healing that's seeking to happen. This is about our own personal awakening, right? Because when we find that thing where our deep gladness is, these aspects of ourselves that are just seeking to come out into the world, and we pair that with some deep hunger that we're really connected with, we're finding that place of purpose. We're finding that place of calling. We're finding that place where maybe we are all actually bodhisattvas, too. We just didn't know we signed up for that like 4 lifetimes ago. Thanks a lot, past self. I'm coming back to earth again now. Like, look at its place. But we're here for a reason. And I think all of us that are attracted to these kinds of spiritual communities sense into that. And I'm always so awed by the people that I get to be in contact with and interact with every time I come to a new spiritual community, because I know that I'm literally experiencing the divine. I'm literally experiencing the bodhisattva before my eyes. And so I want to end with this idea of for something and against no one, right? Our founder, Dr. Ernest Holmes, he talked about for something and against nothing. But I actually feel like I can be against some things in the world, right? Like I could be against racism and bigotry and homophobia. Like that feels okay to me. Ernest Holmes, I love you, but where I do draw that line is for something and against no one, right? Dr. Gary Simmons, who wrote this book, who a lot of the work I'll be doing in the workshop is based off of, he wrote this beautiful quote. He said, "We want to make sure there's alignment between the sacred yes that I'm putting my attention on, so that it's big enough to contain a vision in which everyone gets to be whole." This is a hard thing for us right now. I recognize that, we're kind of living in a polarized time. Our leaders on both sides are really modeling like how to hate one another, right? They're doing a really good job of that. And yet what we know, and if we really want to approach transformation from a perspective of spirituality, we know that we got to do this from a place of wholeness, and we got to do it from a place where everyone else gets to be whole as well. We don't have to agree, but your wholeness and your divinity must stay intact, and so does mine. So a lot of the work we're going to be doing is going to come from Gary Simmons' work, which is really like living with nothing and no one against you, and it's really recognizing it's tapping into those aspects that I was talking about before of how we're being called to be in the world, and continually grounding ourselves in that every time we get a little bit triggered. Every time we're giving our power away, every time we're wanting to respond in a flight or fight, which I do that all the time, so that we can continue to live this vision. And that vision can stay large enough where everyone gets to stay whole. Because this is what I believe that we're all being called to do, and I know that this community is on the forefront of that. This is not a political thing of getting out into the world. This is spiritual work. This is deep, brave, bold, spiritual work. And I know we're all ready for it. So let's take a deep breath. Close our eyes. And as we breathe out, come into the recognition that maybe we are a bodhisattva. And that there is this one energy, this one resonance that is happening at the center of our being, and every time that we make a connection, a genuine connection with another human being, we are experiencing the divine through that person and through the resonance that is happening between us. So that God gets to exist not only as us, not only with us, not only around us, but between the interactions that we have with each other. And that life and love continue to show up in ways that are unexpected, but yet totally divine, totally encompassing of our life as a whole. And so what I know for each and every person here, or for each and every person that's watching online, is that we are all here on purpose and on time. And that as we connect, like as we let our hearts open, as we experience real compassion, so too are we experiencing real connection to the one. And so we let it, we allow that connection continue to cultivate life and love in ways that we've never experienced before. And we let that be the truest truth of our life. We let that be the guide in our life, and we let that lead us forward step by step, knowing that our spiritual path widens as we grow more in oneness together. And so we just let this all be so, release it into the law, and we let it be. And together we can say, and so it is.